You'd think a thunderclap in broad daylight might rattle the soul, but no, it was the shrill ring of my phone that did the trick. There I was, mid-sip of my lukewarm coffee, minding my own business like any other Tuesday. "The project's gone belly up," barked Jessica from accounting, sounding half frantic, half desperate. I wiped my mouth, straightened my papers, and thought, well, here we go again. Just another day where I'm the only one with a clue and everyone else's ship is sinking fast. The day after Jessica's panicked call, I found myself sitting behind my desk, a good 10 feet away from the rest of the office circus. The humdrum drone of keyboards, the occasional rattle of cups and clattering footsteps, the usual backdrop of a mid-sized marketing firm's daily grind. By the way, before we dive in, tell me in the comments. Ever seen someone get the revenge they really deserved? I read all of them. Hey, while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's continue. I'm me, 32, a data analyst by trade, and judging by the looks I get, the office's unsung wizard of numbers. I'm not the type to flaunt it, not much for fanfare. You'll never hear me boasting about pulling all-nighters or juggling deadlines like a circus performer. No, my work tends to speak for itself, which is why the teasing comes easy. My colleagues call me the machine or joke that I never sleep. Always with a smirk, of course. When I'm not around, they say, me's the one burning the midnight oil again. One afternoon, about a month before the crash, I noticed Darren, our project manager, leaning a little too long over his screen. Not that I hadn't caught him scrambling before, but this time there was a shift. He'd been giving me quick, sidelong glances as if weighing a secret. He'd shuffle some papers, then suddenly dive into meetings without me. The last time he did that, I caught a glimpse of an email preview on his screen, something about budget overruns and client dissatisfaction. I wasn't about to stir the pot by asking questions. No, I folded the thought into my work instead. Every time I got a chance, I double-checked the reports, cross-referenced data points, and ran my usual analyses. When Darren came by for updates, I handed over spreadsheets and quietly fixed those little inconsistencies that didn't fit the story. "You sure you don't want me to run this by the client?" Darren asked one day, squinting at a report I'd finished. "Better we have it tight before then," I said, pushing a freshly printed page his way. He shrugged but nodded. Something was off, though. You could see it in the way his smile faltered just a bit when I mentioned the numbers. The weeks before the crisis, the usual water cooler chatter started to take on a different tone. Jokes about the impossible deadlines and invisible team members had a sharper edge. I heard snippets, things like, "If me's not pulling the weight, where are the numbers?" Or "Maybe the data's not as solid as she thinks." That was their version of a jab, I figured. In the quiet moments, I pulled myself into the dim glow of my computer screen after hours. While others left with their bags slung over shoulders, I lingered, checking logs, scanning emails, archiving versions of reports. I copied files that seemed important, cataloged updates, bookmarked conversations. Without making a fuss, without raising suspicion, I kept a tight grasp on every detail I might need. My coworker, Jenny, a bubbly marketing coordinator, popped her head over my cubicle wall one evening. "Me, you're still here. You're going to turn into a ghost if you keep this up." I smiled without looking away. "Ghosts see things others don't, Jenny." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're always one step ahead, aren't you?" "Someone's got to be," I muttered. In those long, quiet hours, I could almost hear the whispers of the project's fragility, the little cracks in timelines and budgets that Darren and the others tried to gloss over. I didn't need a memo to tell me the company was teetering on the edge of disaster. My data was whispering warnings loud enough for anyone willing to listen. But no one else seemed to listen. One Friday afternoon, I spotted Darren cornering Lisa, our client liaison, in the break room. Their conversation was hushed but urgent. Darren's fingers tapped nervously on the counter while Lisa's arms crossed tight. "You don't want this to get out, do you?" Darren asked in a low voice. Lisa just nodded, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her unease. I turned away, pretending to adjust my scarf, but inside I was taking notes, mental ones at least. That weekend, I sat down with a fresh cup of coffee, spreadsheets spread across my kitchen table like a battlefield map. I wasn't the loudest voice in the office, but I was the one who knew the terrain better than anyone. Slowly, deliberately, I started piecing together the fragments. The numbers that didn't quite add up, the missed deadlines that weren't in the official timeline, the client emails that hinted at dissatisfaction without saying it outright. Each detail was a stitch in the fabric of the problem no one else wanted to face. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. No dramatic announcements or declarations of impending doom. I simply prepared. Because when the storm hit, I'd be ready, and the others would be coming to me, one by one, hoping I could stitch their sinking ship back together. And that's just what I intended to do. The Monday morning sun spilled weakly through the blinds, casting pale stripes across my desk. I was barely 5 sips into my coffee when the phone lit up again, that sharp trill slicing through the usual office murmur like a hawk's cry. Jessica's voice cracked the calm with a tremor I hadn't heard before. "Me, it's bad, worse than we thought, the client's furious. They're threatening to pull the whole contract." I straightened up, my fingers tightening around the receiver. "Slow down. What happened?" There was a pause, a shaky breath. "The reports, the numbers don't match what we sent last week. They found discrepancies in the budget estimates and the project timeline. It's all off, I'm sorry, me." I thought Darren had it under control. I didn't answer right away. The room felt suddenly colder. My eyes flicked to the calendar, mid-October, the home stretch for the campaign launch, and here was the chaos rearing its ugly head just when we needed to be steady. "Where's Darren?" I asked, voice even but firm. "Gone, left an hour ago, said he needed some fresh air." I let out a dry laugh, the kind you swallow down so it doesn't choke you. Fresh air, right. I imagined him pacing the parking lot, hands jammed in pockets, muttering apologies to no one. I glanced at my inbox. More flagged emails, this time from Lisa. Subject line: "Urgent client meeting, damage control." They wanted answers, and fast. "All right," I said. "Get everyone in the conference room, I'll be right there." When I walked in, the air was thick with tension. Faces looked up, some hopeful, some resigned, others downright anxious. Jessica gave me a tight smile. "We were counting on you, me." I nodded, not because I felt ready, but because it was true. The others looked to me as if I was some oracle who held the key to salvation. Darren sat at the far end, eyes darting around like a cornered fox. He didn't say a word as I connected my laptop to the projector. "Let's get this straight," I began, voice steady. "The client noticed that our reported budget and timeline don't line up with reality, and somehow that slipped past management." Darren shifted uncomfortably. I was handling the updates." "You were hiding them," I said bluntly, clicking through slides showing the data trail. "Look here." I pointed to a graph where last-minute cuts and unexplained expenses were glaring in red. And here, the timeline was shifted without consulting the team. Silence fell, then Lisa's voice broke through, low and sharp. "Me, how did you get these numbers?" I glanced at her. I cross-checked every report. I keep a running log of the actual data versus what was sent. When things looked off, I started paying closer attention. Jessica chimed in, "So you knew something was wrong before it blew up?" "I did," I said it without bitterness. "But I needed to be certain before raising the alarm. This isn't the first time these issues came up. I just wanted to be prepared." Darren's eyes flashed anger, but the rest of the room was listening, hanging on my words like lifelines. Suddenly Mark, one of the junior analysts, spoke up. "Me, this is impressive. We were all blindsided, but you've been quietly keeping watch." The weight in the room shifted. People who had once called me the machine now looked at me with a grudging respect. Then came the question that made my stomach twist. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. I looked at the faces, some fearful, some hopeful. "We fix this. We own up to the errors, present the real picture to the client, and propose a recovery plan. And I'll need everyone on board." A murmur of assent followed. After the meeting broke, Darren approached me, voice low. "Me, you've got to cover for me. I can't let this sink me." I met his gaze, cold as the steel in my veins. "You should have thought about that before hiding the truth." He blinked and without another word turned and left. That day was a whirlwind. One by one, my colleagues stopped by my desk. Tim from accounting shuffled in with a nervous smile. "Me, can you help me reconcile these figures? I don't want to mess this up." I nodded. "Let's get to work." Jenny, the marketing coordinator, peeked around the corner. "Need an extra hand? I'm ready to pull overtime." I smiled, feeling the tide turning. By evening, the project that had teetered on the brink looked a little less doomed, thanks to data carefully gathered and laid bare. I was exhausted but alive with the knowledge that, when the storm came, I was the steady hand on the wheel. And the others, they were coming to me, one by one, hoping I'd steer them to safer waters. Little did they know, I wasn't done yet. The night that followed the morning meeting felt like the calm before a storm you knew was hell-bent on blowing the roof off. But I wasn't one to cower when the winds started howling. No, sir. If anything, I was rolling up my sleeves tighter, ready to do the work others seemed too rattled to even think about. By 9 o'clock, the office had emptied out except for me, Tim from accounting, and Jenny, who insisted on sticking around to help with whatever needed doing. Tim sat hunched over a heap of invoices and spreadsheets, his brow furrowed in that way folks get when they're trying to make numbers behave. "You sure this is the right batch?" he muttered, nudging a thick folder across the desk. I squinted at the papers, cross-referencing the figures with the data I'd been gathering over the past weeks. "That's the one, see here. The payments that were supposed to come in last month didn't clear until this week. That threw off the cash flow projections and made it look like we had more money to spend than we actually did." Tim ran his fingers through his hair. "No wonder the client's breathing fire. This looks like someone cooked the books." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled up the audit logs and started mapping out the trail, who approved what, when, and how the numbers shifted with each round of edits. That was when I saw it, the subtle but deliberate changes Darren had been making. Jenny leaned in, eyes wide. "So he was fudging the numbers." "More like hiding the real picture," I said, and doing it carefully enough to avoid immediate suspicion. "But why?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I shrugged. Maybe pressure, maybe panic. Or maybe he thought he could patch things up later without anyone noticing. The thought made me grimace. Patching up a sinking ship with duct tape and prayers wasn't my style. I needed more than just intuition, I needed solid proof. Proof that I could lay on the table and say, "Here, this is what went wrong and who's responsible." Over the next few days, I turned into something of a detective. Not the kind with a trench coat and magnifying glass, but the kind armed with spreadsheets, timestamps, and relentless curiosity. I traced emails, printing out versions and lining them up like soldiers on parade. I pored over internal chat logs, hunting for inconsistencies. When I stumbled upon a thread where Darren had told Lisa to keep the client distracted, my jaw tightened. Jenny and Tim became my impromptu allies. Jenny, with her knack for detail, caught discrepancies in project memos and marketing materials. Tim sifted through financial records with the kind of patience I admired. "Me, you're a wonder," Tim said one evening, pushing back his chair. "I don't know how you keep all this straight." I smiled, but it was a tired smile. It's about knowing where to look and not letting go until the puzzle fits. Lisa dropped by unexpectedly, her usually polished composure cracked with worry. "I'm sorry to barge in," she said, glancing around the quiet room. "But I've been talking to the client, and they're ready to walk if we don't have a solid fix." I nodded. "I'm working on a full report. Something that lays it all bare, no sugar coating." She looked relieved but wary. "You're the only one who can pull this off, me." The pressure was thick, but I welcomed it. Because when the chips are down, that's when a person shows their true mettle. One afternoon, as I was going through a folder of project revisions, Darren slipped into the office. He had that look, equal parts desperation and calculated calm. "Me, can we talk?" he asked. I didn't look up. "About what?" "Look, I know things got messy. I want to help fix it." I finally met his gaze. "Help or cover your tracks." He hesitated, then sank into the chair opposite me. I was overwhelmed. I made mistakes. "But if we don't get ahead of this, the whole team suffers." I leaned forward, voice low but firm. "Mistakes are one thing, concealing them is another. You'll need to be part of the solution, not the problem." He nodded slowly, like a man accepting a bitter pill. "I'm with you." With Darren's reluctant cooperation, I gained access to some internal files that had been off-limits before. It was like opening a door to the heart of the mess. Every piece I uncovered strengthened the case. Timelines shifted without explanation, budget lines crossed out and rewritten, client feedback buried in forgotten folders. Jenny found a draft of a client presentation that didn't match what was finally sent. Me, whoever did this was playing a dangerous game. Tim shook his head. "If the client sees this, they won't just be angry, they'll want guarantees." I sighed. Guarantees require a plan, and I'm putting one together. Piece by piece, day by day, I built a fortress of facts and figures. I prepared for the moment when it would be time to lay everything on the table. To show the whole office, the client, and the suits upstairs who had been too busy looking the other way that the problem was not just numbers gone awry. It was deliberate, and it needed to be confronted head-on. At the same time, I took care to shield those who'd been dragged into the fallout through no fault of their own. Jenny's cheerful efforts to rally the marketing team didn't go unnoticed, and Tim's quiet diligence kept the books honest. I made sure they knew they had a defender. "Me," Jenny said one evening as we locked up the office, "you're going to win this, I can feel it." I smiled, worn but resolute. "We're going to win this. Together." That was the strength I needed, not just the cold, hard data, but the people who believed in the truth, even when it was buried under a mountain of lies. And when the time came to face the music, I'd have more than numbers on my side. I'd have the story, the proof, and the team behind me. Because sometimes, saving a project isn't just about crunching figures. It's about knowing when to stand firm, when to push back, and when to let the truth speak louder than the whispers. And that day was coming fast. The day of reckoning arrived like a thunderclap, rattling the office's usual calm and sending ripples through every corner of the building. The conference room, usually a place for polite nodding and watered-down presentations, now felt like a courtroom, the air thick with anticipation and barely concealed tension. I stood at the head of the table, laptop connected, screen glowing with the mountain of data and documents I'd painstakingly assembled. The truth laid bare in pixelated clarity. Darren sat stiffly near the back, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack a walnut. Lisa, ever the poised mediator, perched beside him, her eyes flicking between the screen and the faces crowded around the table. Jenny and Tim, my steadfast allies, occupied seats closer to me, their expressions a mix of nerves and quiet confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady but carrying the weight of what was to come, "this project has faced setbacks that were avoidable, and the fallout we're experiencing is not the result of mere oversight." I clicked the remote, and the first slide illuminated the room, a timeline showing the cascading series of budget cuts, timeline shifts, and altered reports. "You'll notice here," I said, pointing to the glaring red annotations, "that many of these changes were implemented without team consultation or client notification. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate attempt to mask underlying issues." Murmurs rippled through the room. Darren's face reddened and he shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I held his gaze unflinching. "I'm speaking, of course, about the discrepancies you've seen in the reports and the budget changes that have eroded the trust our client placed in us." I switched to the next slide, a chain of emails and chat logs where Darren had directed Lisa to manage the narrative and keep the client reassured. The words hung in the air like a noose. Lisa cleared her throat, looking at Darren with a mixture of disappointment and concern. "I was following orders," she said quietly, "but it never felt right." Darren finally spoke, voice tight. "I was under pressure, everyone was. I thought I could fix it before it got out." "By burying the truth?" I asked, voice calm but cutting. He swallowed hard. "I didn't want to drag the team down." "You already have," I said, "but this isn't just about blame. It's about moving forward, honestly and transparently." Jenny leaned forward, breaking the silence. "Me's right, we can't rebuild trust by pretending the mess isn't there, we have to own it." Tim nodded, flipping through his ledger. "And the numbers back her up. We can show the client exactly where things went wrong and offer a realistic plan to get us back on track." The room shifted, the initial defensiveness softened into tentative acceptance. Suddenly the door swung open and Mr. Caldwell, our regional director, strode in, face set like granite. He glanced around, eyes narrowing on the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. "Report," he barked. I stepped forward. "Sir, we've uncovered deliberate misinformation in the project reports. Darren altered budget data and timelines without team or client approval." Caldwell's gaze settled on Darren. "Is this true?" Darren looked down, then nodded. "Unacceptable," Caldwell said. You've done the office a service. We need full transparency with the client and a recovery plan immediately." He turned to the others. "Everyone will cooperate fully. This is our chance to fix what's broken." Later, as the room emptied, Darren lingered near my desk, hesitation in his stance. He said quietly, "I didn't realize how deep the hole was until you showed me. I want to help fix it." I looked at him, the years of tension etched in my mind. "Help means more than words, Darren. It means honesty and doing the hard work." He nodded solemnly. "You'll have it." As the days unfolded, the office atmosphere shifted from fear to resolve. My careful preparation and the evidence I'd gathered became the backbone of our recovery. Colleagues who had once dismissed me as the tireless machine now came to me not with mockery but with respect, asking for guidance, for support. One afternoon, Jenny stopped by my desk, grinning. "You really shook the boat, me. But I think it's for the better." I smiled back, tired but unbroken. Sometimes you have to rock the boat to find steady ground. And just like that, the tide began to turn. The morning after the showdown, the office felt less like a battlefield and more like a place ready to mend. You could almost hear the quiet hum of determination buzzing beneath the surface, like a slow fire rekindling from embers long thought dead. I was at my desk early, the glow of my screen painting my face in pale blue, and for once, the caffeine didn't feel like a necessity but a comfort. Jenny breezed past my cubicle, waving a sheaf of papers with her trademark grin. Me, client called, they want to hear our recovery plan by noon. You think we can pull it off? I glanced up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes but smiling anyway. We don't just think, we know. Let's get to work. Tim appeared with a fresh coffee in each hand. One for you, one for me. We'll be here till we're blue in the face. I accepted the cup gratefully. Appreciate it. We're going to need every ounce of stamina. We dove in head first, carving through data and draft reports like a team on a mission. Jenny had already lined up the marketing revisions, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she updated timelines to reflect our newfound honesty. Tim double-checked every number, his sharp eyes catching inconsistencies no one else would dare miss. Me, Tim said after a particularly long pause, pointing at a spreadsheet, this projection here. If we cut back on some of the planned ad spots and focus on digital, we can save the client a good chunk without hurting reach. Jenny leaned over my shoulder, and digital's where it's at anyway. Maybe this mess is a blessing in disguise. I nodded slowly, appreciating the silver lining but wary of getting too optimistic. It's a start, but we need to show the client we've learned. No more smoke and mirrors. By mid-morning, Lisa stopped by my desk, looking both relieved and a little bit hopeful. The client's on board with the plan so far. They want a presentation that's straightforward, no sugarcoating, just facts and fixes. I smiled. That's all they deserve. When noon rolled around, the conference room filled once again, but this time with a different air. People exchanged determined glances instead of worried ones. I started the presentation, laying out the revised budget, the adjusted timelines, and the steps we'd take to keep the project on course. This plan isn't perfect, I told the room, but it's honest. It's based on the data we gathered and the reality we're facing. And it comes with a commitment from me and from everyone here to make things right. The client reps nodded thoughtfully, some jotting down notes, others exchanging quiet whispers. When the presentation ended, one of them, a stern man named Mr. Harper, spoke up. It's refreshing to see transparency. We had our doubts, but this plan shows promise. Jenny whispered as we left the room, I told you. Sometimes the truth's the best pitch. Over the following days, the project slowly regained footing. Emails flew back and forth, meetings filled calendars, and late nights became the new norm. But something had shifted. Where once there was dread, now there was purpose. One afternoon, as I was printing out a progress report, Darren approached, a stack of papers clutched tightly in his hands. Me, I wanted to say, thanks. For giving me a chance to make this right. I glanced up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. It's not about chances, Darren, it's about doing the work, don't waste it. He nodded, looking more grounded than I'd seen him in weeks. Meanwhile, Tim and Jenny kept the engine running smoothly. Jenny's quick thinking saved us from a last-minute marketing hiccup, while Tim's meticulous accounting kept our finances transparent and honest. One evening, as the office emptied out and the glow of city lights spilled through the windows, Jenny stayed behind, sipping her coffee and grinning. You've changed things around here, me. People are looking at you differently. I laughed softly. Maybe now they see the real me, not just the machine they joked about. She nudged my arm playfully. Well, whatever you are, don't stop. I looked around the quiet office, the hum of computers cooling down, and felt a rare sense of peace. The crisis hadn't disappeared, but we were moving forward together. And for the first time in a long while, I believed we'd make it through. The weeks that followed felt like watching a slow sunrise after a long, dark night. Darren's missteps weren't forgotten, but the company was moving forward without the smoke and mirrors. He found himself in fewer meetings, more behind the scenes, quietly doing what needed doing. One afternoon, I caught him in the break room, staring down at his coffee like it held the answers he couldn't find elsewhere. You doing okay? I asked, leaning against the counter. He sighed, nodding. Learning the hard way. I'm paying for the shortcuts I took. I gave a small smile. Good, that's the only way some folks learn. The client started showing signs of renewed trust, responding promptly, even praising our renewed honesty. Lisa stopped by my desk one day, eyes bright with a mix of relief and pride. The boards noticed the turnaround. They want to meet with you next week. I blinked, me wide. She grinned. Because you're the one who pulled this mess out of the fire. It struck me then how much had shifted. From whispered jabs about being the tireless machine, I was now the go-to person, respected, trusted, and maybe even admired. The financials were cleaner, the timelines tighter, and the team stronger. Jenny popped her head in, carrying a box of snacks. "Me, looks like you're finally getting the credit you deserve." I laughed, accepting a granola bar. Took some time, but better late than never. As I looked around the office at the faces now freer from worry and doubt, I felt a quiet strength settle in me. The crisis had tested us all, but it had made me stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. The office felt different now, lighter, as if the weight of that long storm had finally lifted. I caught Jenny humming softly by the printer, and Tim was back to his usual quiet smile, balancing numbers without the ghost of yesterday's worries hanging over his shoulders. One evening, as I gathered my things, Lisa stopped by my desk. "Me, the board's offering you a new role, head of project oversight. They want someone who sees the truth, no matter how uncomfortable." I paused, surprised but steady. "That's a big step." She smiled warmly. "You earned it, not by running from the hard parts but by facing them head-on." Outside, the city lights twinkled like promises yet to be kept. I thought about the months past, the whispers, the pressure, the long nights turning doubt into resolve. Jenny nudged me playfully. "You've gone from the machine to the heart of this place." I laughed. Maybe machine was just the start. Now I'm something more. As I locked the office door behind me, the cool night air wrapped around me like a fresh beginning. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, independent, and ready for whatever came next. Sometimes life's hardest storms reveal the strongest roots, and mine were just beginning to grow.